Our fears of failure, conflict, disappointment are often trying to tell us something. So instead of pushing fear away, what would happen if you became friends with it? I'm Sally Ann Airy, and welcome to Fearless Forward, the podcast that asks leaders how they face their fears. Today I'm in conversation with someone whose working life has been a rare synthesis of two different professions, using her skill in one to become an influential shaper of the other. Liz Hall is a journalist, coach, mindfulness teacher, and for the past 20 years, editor of Coaching at Work magazine. Following a language degree, Liz spent 7 years writing and editing for business, health, HR and leadership publications and national newspapers before accepting an invitation in 2005 to become the launch editor of Coaching at Work. At the time, she knew nothing about coaching, but this new role was to become a pivotal point in her life. Inspired by the promise of coaching for both self-development and service to others, she qualified as a coach herself and began pursuing the two careers in parallel. She became an expert coaching practitioner and a certified mindfulness teacher. Today, her coaching practice is deeply informed by systems thinking, somatics, compassion, and what she calls relational mindfulness. Liz is a thought leader in areas such as psychological safety, race equity in coaching, and the climate emergency. And she's a pioneer of mindfulness in coaching. In her editorial role for what is known as the Industry Bible, she's become one of the most highly respected voices in the field, authoring several influential books, including Mindful Coaching, Coach Your Team, Coaching in Times of Crisis and Transformation, and most recently, Relational Mindfulness for Coaches, as well as literally hundreds of articles. In this conversation, Liz shares her perspective from her bird's eye view on how she sees fear playing out in relationships, work, and personal and professional development, including her own.
So I'd been writing about HR and business and stuff like that, and knew this chap who, a fellow journalist, and he got in touch with me and said, "Hey, we're launching a magazine at the Chartered Institute for People Management." It was then, I think, the Institute of Personnel Management became the CIPD, and would I interested in being the editor? And so I thought, well, I love this guy. He's great. I'd be interested in collaborating with him. He said it's about coaching. I was like, okay, great, fine. What's that? Off I went, rang up a friend who was a trainer and said, what's this coaching thing? So at that point, I had literally no idea what coaching was. But I was drawn to this new idea, this new venture. And it sounded very quickly, very exciting, this whole field of coaching. So, I was hooked.
And now you are where you are. You've written several books on coaching. You're a pioneer of mindfulness in coaching. So 20 years on, you're in a very different place. But thinking back, what I'm hearing, as you stepped into this new role, I'm not hearing any fear particularly. I mean, do you remember how you felt?
Yes, you're not hearing fear, but there was fear, Sally Ann. There definitely was. I was terrified. It was one of those things that, I was really excited at the same time, but it was my first editorship. So I was, new to that whole thing. I didn't know much about coaching. I had no idea it felt what I was doing. But there I was giving it a good go. So I did feel it was a big deal, and I wasn't sure if I was up to it, and all the rest of it. So I can definitely remember the fear.
And you mentioned excitement as well. That kind of mix, isn't there, sometimes, of this sort of feeling in our tummy, in our gut, of excitement mixed with, I don't know, apprehension. Oh my goodness, can I do this thing? And then you do it. It's like you step into that, so to speak, right?
Yeah, you do. You do it with all those feelings, and then a few years later, about 4 years later, the CIPD was deciding it didn't want to be as involved in coaching, so it was going to close the magazine or sell the magazine. So there was another sort of moment at which I took a big leap with a colleague, and we bought the magazine out, and that felt really scary because suddenly we were putting money in, our own money, into the magazine in 2009. So again, that whole sort of sense of, oh my goodness, what are we doing? What am I doing? But I'm going to do it anyway, you know? So,
And what drove that at the time?
Firstly, when I heard the news that they were thinking about closing magazines, I was just really upset. Like I was a victim. It was being done to me. You know, I didn't want the magazine to close, and isn't that a shame? Or what am I going to do? And then when I realised they were sort of selling it, I was like, that's interesting. And then I had a conversation with a dear friend who's a coach. You know what it's like when you've got friends who are coaches as well. And he said, "Shall I? Can we have a sort of coaching style conversation? Would you want that, Liz?" I said, "Okay." And he said, "Okay, let's talk about coaching at work." And we talked about the magazine and what I might want to do with it. And I really got in touch with my purpose around the magazine and how dear it was to me, not just because I enjoyed the work, but because I really cared about coaching. I really cared that there be a sort of independent magazine for the coaching profession. I loved, and I still do, nurturing different voices, enabling different people to share what they were doing, and all of the lovely things that I still love about the magazine. And so I really got in touch with that thanks to this dear friend. And that was it. You know, I thought, right, we've got to keep going. Let's let this happen. Despite the fear, or with the fear, alongside the fear.
So when the purpose is clear and when you can connect with it in that way at a sort of heartfelt level, I guess, this is what I'm here to do. This means something to me. Then it's as if the need, so to speak, it speaks more loudly than the fear. Do you think?
Or it becomes, you know, it suddenly you think like it's okay. I can be with this fear because there's something. Yeah. So I guess that's another way of saying it speaks louder. It's bigger than it's bigger than the fear.
Or I can be with it because this other thing is more important. So that's what you did. So you bought the magazine, and then I suppose you had full control over it, right?
Exactly.
So what happened then?
So, I mean, you know, I think this whole thing about sort of gathering voices, you know, having more freedom to expand the range in terms of who we spoke to. I mean, it's still called Coaching at Work, so it's primarily about coaching in the workplace. But I think there's something about as we mature as coaches, we are informed by all sorts of different disciplines, schools of thought. You know, so there's something about sort of situating coaching in the wider world, I suppose. So I had more capacity, more freedom to do that, and not be constrained by the sort of more conventional applications of coaching. But not to say there's nothing wrong with those; they're wonderful. But it was something about that, some freedom around that, and just freedom to experiment and do all sorts of things. You know, we launched in 2020 something called Climate Coaching Action Day, which is an annual initiative to sort of encourage and celebrate coaching around the climate. Although I think perhaps these days we think more broadly, but certainly back in those days, climate was, you know, seemed to be an isolated issue, which of course it's not. But things like that, I didn't have to get permission. We think this is really important, let's do that. And the same with the round table for race equity in coaching. It's like, I think that's a great idea. Let's gather all the professional bodies and we can see how together we can sort of shift the needle around that. But again, didn't have to get permission. So you have all these lovely ideas and you get to do them. So
And you're working in collaboration, so the co-owner of the magazine and presumably people whom you're consulting and talking to, as you say, getting the professional bodies together. I'm imagining that you have people you go to when an idea occurs to you that you want to develop.
yeah, I mean, I'm really lucky to have a whole bunch of contacts all over the world, brilliant minds, wonderful people who I can brainstorm with, including that dear friend who coached me back in the day. So just bouncing ideas around, getting advice, you know. So absolutely, we have an editorial advisory board, but it's broader than that. Just sort of all sorts of conversations, which are just such a gift and really interesting.
So thinking about your direction with all of this, 20 years in, celebrating as you did last year, this big milestone. What are your thoughts with respect to the magazine? What are your thoughts for the future?
So I think I see coaching at work continuing to play a role in helping to shape the profession, be that around AI, how we can navigate the whole sort of realms of, well, AI coach bots and all the rest of it. So really continuing to play a role in fostering debate, continuing to showcase different voices. So be that sort of, indigenous or cultures or whatever it is, just really sort of keeping the inspiration flowing, if you like. We went online back in 2019, so that's not going to change anything for us. We're already online, but yeah, continuing to foster debate and showcase sort of different approaches.
And you mentioned, AI coach bots. What are your thoughts on that?
So, I mean, I think, as you all know, there was some research a while ago which showed that AI coach bots have already, if they were being assessed as by in terms of what level they'd reached in the ICF, the International Coaching Federation, sort of assessment criteria, they would already have reached PCC, which is the top tier, the bottom tier. I think it's absolutely fascinating, but I think what we have as human to human coaches is completely different to what's offered by an AI coach bot. So I think there's a lot that AI coach bots can do. But for me, the magic happens in relationship, in human to human relationship. It's about connection. We know that the relationship is the most important thing in coaching, and it's just a different relationship you have with a coach bot. You know, that sort of challenging, that the sort of the presence that a human coach can have that helps to create a container in which the client can feel totally safe and heard and seen. And so I think it's just a totally different ball game. Whether that will continue to be the case, who knows? Who knows where we're going to end up? But I think for now, for me, it's shining a spotlight, if you like, on what the real gifts we can bring are as human coaches. And I'm hoping it'll help amplify that, and encourage a lot more coaches and leaders to say, okay, that's where the magic's at. Can I just work more on developing that? Can I work more on being more present, more aware, compassionate?
Yeah, so the magic we bring as human coaches and leaders. And you touched on it there, that being more present is one, more compassionate is another. And I know compassion in coaching is one of the areas that you've focused on, isn't it, in recent years?
So for me, mindfulness and compassion go together, as is the case for many people. So it's something about us becoming more present and aware, and at the same time sort of developing our heart muscle, if you like, our capacity to feel empathy, but also feel compassion, and that is, I think, is it's so resourcing. I think a lot of times people fear that they'll have too much compassion, and that they'll get depleted. I think we know from the research that that's not the case, that compassion is actually really resourcing. And it's when we tip into empathic distress, so we feel what someone else is feeling. That's a gift that many of us as humans have. We feel someone's pain, and if we're sort of stuck in that, in the pit with them, then that can, yes, be very depleting. But if we're able to have sort of almost like a passionate detachment, and just really care, and feel we can do something about that, or if we can't do something about it, we can have the intention to support them. So it's a very different sort of energy in a way. So I think in these times of challenging times we live in, and lead in and coach in, I think knowing that compassion can be a resource, and consciously practicing developing compassion through, I mean, there's lots of exercises and practices out there, aren't there? But that sort of intentionality around developing compassion, knowing that it's actually really transformational, not only in terms of it resourcing us, but in terms of that, again, that magic we were talking about, that connection with others. And again, we're living in times of increased polarization, aren't we, and conflict. So I think we need it more than ever. The trend, if you like, is almost pulling us. Being pulled towards othering. We're being pulled towards, they're not in my tribe, this is my tribe. On social media, in terms of the conflicts playing out. So I think, yeah, it behooves us as humans, as coaches, as leaders, to really ramp that up, and it's really powerful. So yeah, a lot of work that I do is writing about compassion focused coaching and bringing it into my work with leaders and other clients. And it's very important for myself. And self-compassion. I mean, you can hear the passion. I will pause in a minute, but the self-compassion piece, life's hard, isn't it? And developing our capacity to be compassionate towards ourselves, kind towards ourselves, is so important.
So interesting, isn't it? I mean, why is it, do you think, Liz, with all of the work and research you've done on this, writing about it, a lot of thought, why is it, do you think, that we as human beings find it so difficult to be compassionate towards ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really big question, and I think there's a lot in there. One thing is that as humans, we're wired to sort of scan the environment, aren't we, to see where there's danger, where there's risk. And one of the risks to us, to our very survival, is whether we belong in the tribe, whether we're going to get chucked out of the tribe, into the desert to die. So it's natural for us to be able to sort of look at our behavior, see how that is in relation to others, isn't it? So that we can sort of take care of that and think, oh goodness me, I've upset the chief now, or whatever. So we can just see how we're doing in relationship. So we have this sort of self-critical voice that says, oh, there you go, no, that's not so good, so I think that's one part of it, that it's, I think, one way to become self-compassionate is to understand that it's normal, in a way, for us to be hard on ourselves. We have that sort of, as you know, that negative bias. So we're primed to watch out for the negative, and the positive sort of slides off like Teflon, isn't it? So it sort of slides off us. So we have to practice watching out for the nice things and the positive. So I think that's part of it, that it being normal, really, to be watching out for the negative, including how we're showing up. I think it's also the culture we live in as well. I think particularly, I mean, I'm an old person now, but I feel for the young of today, because there's so much comparison, isn't there? And social media, I mean, it's so difficult. So I think, of course, we're primed to compare ourselves to others, but it's so difficult, isn't it, these days with social media? And then I think there's all of the experiences, our lived experiences as we grow, the relational traumas, different attachment problems we've had along the way. So we sort of arrive at adulthood with a whole load of baggage, the wiring we all have, plus our own stuff, which means that there's all these parts kind of clamoring, it feels, to say, oh, I'm getting that wrong, or that's wrong, or this wrong, that wrong. And unless we can sort of become mindful of what's going on, those voices, those parts, they shout louder and louder and become quite deafening. So that's some of the territory. There's quite a lot in there, I think, but I think it's a massively important question. And people really wonder why at the beginning. They say, I don't get it. I can be kind to so-and-so, I can be really compassionate to them, but why is it so hard to give compassion to myself? And I'm like, okay, don't worry. That's normal in a way, but we can do something about that.
So, the human aspect of coaching, as we move into the early stages, my goodness, of AI and chatbots and all of the things which are immensely useful in some ways. When you think about what might be to come, do you find yourself embracing it or fearing it?
Both. So depending on the day. So for me, there's been, and I know I'm not alone in this, because some of the work I do is with sort of climate, people who are working in the climate change arena and so on, or social justice people, and all the rest of it. For me, there's been a bit of relief in turning towards the scale of change that's not necessarily helpful. I mean, I was hesitating because some people would use the word collapse, and that's a choice, I guess, in terms of the language is important, isn't it? In terms of it being empowering, bringing relief, or inducing fear or whatever. So I'm consciously feeling into that right now. But for me, there was some sense of relief in turning towards these are difficult times. And as I say, I've seen that in others, and you have to be ready, I think. And if you're not ready, that's fine. I haven't been ready, and sometimes I'm not ready again, and I sort of go around like this, a spiral, in terms of really turning towards how difficult these times potentially are going to be, and already are for many. So it sounds a bit gloomy in a way. So let me just pause. But there is something about, what's mine to do in these times, what's mine to do in this moment, what I care about. And we talked about purpose, we talked about intention. So there's something about aligning intention and attention and purpose around how I want to live anyway. And that includes in difficult times. So that's the embracing part. Yes, it can feel scary because, yeah, goodness me. I mean, if we're putting the clock back 20 years, we put it back however many years, what a sweet spot that was. I was very lucky growing up in a time when, you know, we thought we didn't look after the climate, the environment that much. We could do better, but we didn't really think it was all falling apart, and so on. Anyway, so we could go on like that. But the embracing part is, how do I want to be? How do I want to live? How do I want to lead anyway? And let that be my North Star, even as things might maybe get a bit rougher. So all the pieces around compassion, connection, be more mindful in my relationships, trying to make this a better world, I guess. We keep doing that. So yeah, and in terms of the embracing the AI, I guess if we just pick off one piece, I'm not doing so well on that, Sally Ann. I'm a bit of a kind of I'm in the sort of, let's resist as long as we can. I don't want to do that. Even when it comes to using basic tools, I sort of give them a whirl and, oh no, that's far too hallucinatory. I'm going to continue writing my own stuff and all the rest of it. So I'm not so good on the embracing tech. But embracing the fact that things are changing rapidly, that's I think what we all have to do a bit, really.
Indeed. Let's be realistic. It is what's happening. And it is beyond our control, even if we wanted to stop it. So it is what's happening. How do we adapt? How do we work with the uncertainty of it, ambiguity of it, and so on? And when it comes down to it, and this is, I suppose, just a fact, that the only thing we can ever really do anything about is ourselves. And as you said, how you want to, I'm paraphrasing, but how you want to show up, take agency, to use a good word, but that is the part we can decide on, coming back to your word, intention. So let's talk about mindfulness. Let's talk about what it is to lead a conscious life.
So I've always cared about people, loved, wanted to sort of, I guess, be a nice person or something like that. But I think my real awakening, or my sort of entry, if you like, into a more conscious life came through pain, through not feeling happy, as I think is the case for many people, through feeling, why am I not happy? I've got the husband, I've got the kids, I've got the, whatever, and just, yeah, sort of, why am I not happy? And I think this is so common for so many people. Sometimes there's a clear reason why people aren't happy, but became a sort of, that the search for what it's all about sort of really gathered pace, I think, with that realization that I was not going to get anything else that was going to change anything. So I started getting into meditation. This was goodness, more than 20 years ago. But it came about from that I'm suffering. So therefore, let's see what I can do to reduce my suffering. I was on holiday in Thailand with my husband and came across some books in a bookshop. I think some monk, some Western monk had written some book or other. But yeah, it just spoke to me in terms of, yeah, we all suffer. So that sort of set me on a path with the mindfulness, with the meditation. I started noticing a lot of benefits for myself in terms of, yeah, feeling happier, but also being more able to be with my suffering, when I did feel sad or I did feel angry. I don't feel angry very often, but, when I did feel whatever, just being with that, being okay to be with that. So it started, I guess, almost like selfish intention to reduce my own suffering. But quite quickly, as I was sort of experiencing so many benefits myself, and at the time I was training as a coach, well, just not that long after I was training as a coach, and I've always sort of talked about how it was as if never the twain shall meet, you know. So I was developing as a coach, practicing my mindfulness, but we can't talk about the mindfulness. That's all a bit fluffy. But I was, and came across certain people who are also into mindfulness, including your lovely self. But it was there weren't that many of us. It felt in those early days who were coaches and into our practice. But yes, I think this kind of wanting to be of service, wanting to share the gifts, wanting to have other people be supported and helped by mindfulness came in quite quickly. So started weaving it into my own coaching. Wrote, as you mentioned, a book quite a long time ago now, and started to talk about it at a conference and all the rest of it, about how we might weave in mindfulness with coaching. So that was the professional side of things. And I think in terms of me, whatever this process, this thing here that's Liz, is about, it's it's just become more and more part of who I am, wanting to live with intention, to live consciously. I as you know, very fond of the sort of Thich Nhat Hanh's lineage. So I've been to sort of Plum Village quite a few times, and um, very aligned with the approach and teachings in that particular Buddhist lineage, which is very much about living each day mindfully and weaving in, being conscious in everything we do. Now that's a bit of a big ask, of course, but that intention to, I can be conscious all the time, awake, mindful. I drift off, I come back, even if it's drinking a cup of tea or whatever it is. So that's been really helpful, I think, in terms of it not being just something I go off and sit on the cushion and meditate and then go back to the rest of my scary, busy life. And I think there's also something about adult development here, that as we get older, if we're lucky and we have the right mentors, coaches, therapists, experiences, we potentially sort of shift from being sort of egocentric to more ecocentric. So it's a kind of natural progression for a lot of us, I think, to kind of it being really important to be of service, to it being really important to be tuned into the wider system, not just what I want, what's wanted, what's emerging. So sort of things like Theory U, Otto Scharmer's work, sort of sensing into the future, what does the emerging future call in? Things like that I'm increasingly informed by. So there's the sort of intention to live more consciously. There's a sort of natural progression, as I think as we mature, if we're lucky. And then there's all these just lovely, lovely gifts that come my way, really, in terms of supporting that, including Otto Scharmer's work, including relational mindfulness. The relational mindfulness, if I may touch on that. So I've talked about having an individual practice, and the benefits that I was experiencing, and the benefits included that the mindfulness would ripple out into my relationships. So the stuff that many of us will know if we have a practice. Suddenly I was finding I was less irritated or less likely to, you know, just be impatient, or, being kinder, being more compassionate, all the rest of it. So when I sort of came across relational mindfulness, I thought, well, I've already got a practice. I'm already being relationally mindful. So what else could it add? But wow, I was really blown away. And so that's been a sort of newish element over the last few years, where I've been really well. I wrote a book with my co-author on relational mindfulness, but sort of some pioneering work there, I think, in terms of bringing that into coaching. So it's about sort of being mindful in relationship in a more explicit way, and drawing on certain guidelines to allow us to be so. So that's been really life-changing for me.
So, being in relationship more mindfully and drawing on certain guidelines, can you give us a sense of what some of those are that you explicitly bring into your coaching conversations?
Absolutely. So a lot of it's around taking care of how I'm showing up in relationship. And so the guidelines, I can just say them, why not, is pause. So that's like coming back home, if you like. In the Plum Village community, the bell is invited to sound. So it's that kind of thing of, let me just come back. So pause, relax, and there's an element as well around allow. So we just kind of consciously scan our body, just see where we're holding tension, our mind as well. So there's a sense of just, I've paused and now I'm relaxing and allowing. And then open becomes like the bridge, if you like, from this more relaxed, not necessarily relaxed, but more mindful and present being into sort of the external, so that I'm holding both what's going on internally and externally, including the moment I'm with you. So I'm aware of what's going on in me and aware of my environment, any noise or whatever, and aware of you. So that's the open piece. And the intention is, as we practice more and more, is that we can definitely be holding both, being attending to both. Listen deeply. Sorry, attune to emergence. I mean, it's not linear really, but attune to emergence. So there's, and in other sort of quarters, we might call it choiceless awareness, for example, but it's that sort of being just really attuned to what's unfolding. As we know, life is changing, unfolding in every moment. So we're just really tuning in even more to that. So as you know, I mean, you'll be doing this already, so it's kind of bringing it more explicitly. But it's that really getting all the data that we can and just being really open to that. And then listen deeply, which again, we do. And it's deep listening is something that Thich Nhat Hanh talked about a lot. And then speak the truth. So that's a bit more complicated to explain, but it's because it's not speak my truth. It's more about listening deeply to what wants to be spoken, and being discerning about that. Do I even want to speak? And what I speak, for it not to be divisive, for it to be kind, for it to be of service, if you like, but it be definitely be authentic. If I choose to share, then it's authentic. It's the truth in that sense, rather than absolute truth, which we could go into. But so they probably resonate a lot in terms of other ways we might see them. But it's a practice to do that. And the relational mindfulness formal practice is a mindful dialogue that both partners are meditating, we're practicing together. And the more we do that, the more I then come into these sort of spaces, even if the person I'm coaching or leading is not mindful at all, I can be the mindful one, sort of, holding the space mindfully. As you know, it's the stuff that but it's ramping it up a bit, I suppose. And yeah, their nervous system will respond. So that's a bit of a sense of it. There's also something in the formal practice where we have contemplations, where we contemplate things to do with being human. And that's a real gift if people get into that, because it's just gorgeous, some of the insights that come through when you're dialoguing mindfully about existential topics. But yeah, just in terms of day-to-day stuff, it's just really ramped up my awareness somehow. And the other piece is around being more and more aware of my blind spots, my patterns, all the patterns we have. So it's one thing, before I would be doing my practice, coming in, being mindful with my client or whatever, but I wasn't getting a chance to practice live with someone else who's signed up for it, and to see my blind spots, like my how, what gets in the way of me being mindful. So I've learned masses, and it's not been a comfortable journey. It's been quite scary, but but that learning,
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you about that, funnily enough, because, thank you for making this thing that we do as experienced coaches more explicit. I think it's helpful to shine a light on that and to bring that kind of thinking brain into play here. What are we doing here? What is it? How do we explain what is happening? And in all of that, when you think about this work and what you're doing and developing and evolving, do you experience fear? And if you do, what's that like for you?
Fear, I just accept that it will always be with me. And so for me, it's about befriending it. It's about accepting that fear is going to be a companion of mine, and not just when there's severe danger and I need to run for the hills. It's just there. It's there for me. I'm sure it's different degrees for different people. I know that I'm not alone for sure, and for me, the fear is often in terms of the relational field. And I think, again, that's can be quite common. And if we think of sort of the work of psychological safety and how important we've found with the research, it is to have, well, or the higher the level of psychological safety, the better the work can be done in teams, for example. But the fear of speaking up, of admitting to failure, inverted commas, because we learn from failing, right? But all of that is often to do with the relationships, isn't it? It's people being scared of being seen, people being scared of not being seen, people being, just fear of being judged, all the rest of it. So I know I'm not alone, but it's something I just keep being with again and again. I have got much more, I don't even know if I've got less fearful, but I've become much braver. And that's interesting. So I can be with the discomfort. So, for example, one of my patterns is to people please, to seek harmony. Bunch of reasons for that. One, I got bullied. My mum was quite strict and stuff like that. So I'd hate getting in trouble, all sorts of reasons along the way. So I like harmony. I don't like conflict. So I certainly don't want to be disrupting and speaking up about something that could be important because it might risk a lack of harmony. Well, that's something I'm just working on. I'm getting much better at just feeling that fear in my tummy, feeling my somatic shape shifts. I'm kind of crunched down and then just going, working with my body literally and sort of expanding to help create some space, but also going, maybe putting my hand on my belly and going, yep, there you are. It's okay. We're going to do this anyway. Guess what? We know it's a bit scary and then maybe some parts up and at it, but just for me, accepting that that's there. It's not really fearless. It's fear with, or I don't know, something about that. Yeah. And it's often relational.
So there's a part of us that the word negotiate comes to mind. I don't know where that came from, but I'm going to say it anyway. That negotiates almost with this fear. There's a part of us doing that and not allowing it to overwhelm us and prevent us from taking the right action, right? I heard you say something like, I'm doing it anyway. Yeah, I feel this thing, but I'm doing it anyway. So you take that first step. And as you take the first step, the fear quietens a bit.
It does, and I think what also helps it quieten is, so yes, feel the fear and I'm doing it anyway, and it can be a negotiation, and it can be sort of being really curious about where that fear is coming from. So for me, that's really important because the fear could be coming from my experiences of whatever when I was younger, but it can also be about a whole bunch of stuff, right? It could be that I'm picking up the fear from someone else or in the system, if there's a big change program or whatever it is. So there's a curiosity that has to be in there. So I'm not just saying, right, okay, here's fear again. I'm going to override that. I'm going to do. It's more like there's going to be fear. I accept there's going to be fear often, and let's be curious. What's it? Because as we know, emotions are messengers, aren't they? So what's the message? Where's it coming from? Do I know? Let's see. And for example, if it's someone else's fear, then I can address that in some other way. Maybe say, let's talk about what's going on for you, whatever. But if it's, I get to realize that it's my fear. I can take care of it. So it's doing it anyway, but at the same time taking care of it. So as I'm talking, I've realised I put both of my hands on my stomach. So that's, I think, something I often do. Like, okay, here we are. Don't worry, I can take care of this. And sometimes I have to postpone the having a conversation with it because I'm in the moment and it's scary. And I'm like, okay, yeah, got you. But I'm going to come back to you later because we're doing this anyway right now. And we're going to have a chat later.
And I love the distinction between, pushing on through despite the fear and moving forward with it. And as you know, this podcast is called Fearless Forward. And this is a question I ask everyone at the end. Given where you are now, Liz, given all the things we've talked about what may or may not happen in the future and your plans and purpose and everything else, what does Fearless Forward mean to you?
It means that I will just keep going until the day I'm no longer able to keep going, and I will keep putting my one step forward and be with the fear. So it's not so much fear less, it's more fear with forward. And it's not going to get in the way of me doing what needs to be done, what's being called forth in me and others.
Thank you very much, Liz.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
When your purpose is clear, that clarity makes your fear manageable. In Liz's story, we hear how fear was present many times over, when she became the first editor of a brand new coaching magazine, and a few years later when she chose to buy it, and in situations when speaking up might disrupt harmony. Liz meets fear not by pushing it away, but by befriending it, staying curious, and learning from it. Her approach to mindfulness and self-compassion help her with this. Liz sees mindfulness not as an escape or a quest for self-improvement, but as a way of being awake to what is happening, moment by moment, and noticing the inner patterns that shape us, and choosing, consciously, compassionately, how to respond. Compassion isn't a soft option, and self-compassion is a viable antidote to the inner critic, a way of being with our difficulties without getting stuck in them. And this feels especially relevant right now for leaders navigating uncertainty, disruption, and rapid change. What if we stopped trying to conquer the fear and started listening to what it's trying to show us? Thank you for listening. Fearless Forward is edited and produced by Mark Steadman. I'll be back with you in 2 weeks for our next conversation about how leaders have faced their fears. To be sure of catching it, go to fearlessforward.org or subscribe to my weekly bulletin at skillfulleaders.com.